This development, Eva, expected to have a big impact on ISIS and in the region. ABC's senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell joins us from our London bureau with more. And Ian, you've covered ISIS extensively in Syria and Iraq. With the death of al-Baghdadi, the group's reclusive leader, how significant of a blow could this be for ISIS?
Yeah, morning, Wes. Look, I think that is the key question. I think it's important in as much as Baghdadi is a key figurehead, the man responsible for tens of thousands of deaths, of rape, of pillage, of occupation. So it will be a blow to the morale of the group. And don't forget the families of US, British, European and other hostages who were beheaded by the group, the Yazidi women who were taken as sex slaves, the many countless families who were murdered by ISIS. They will all be celebrating this day. But pretty much since the fall of the so-called caliphate, ISIS isn't really a strictly hierarchical organisation, and so the physical impact on the group is likely to be limited. Whit?
And Ian, as we've mentioned and touched on, the past 2 weeks have come with extraordinary developments in Syria. President Trump abruptly moving U.S. troops, Turkey and Russia beefing up their positions. What could the death of the ISIS leader mean for the shifting power dynamic in the region?
Well, I think on one level, it probably doesn't change much. Because they've now morphed into this guerrilla-type insurgency, I think we should expect that to continue. In fact, after US troops withdrew and Turkish troops came across that border, we already saw an uptick in ISIS attacks cross over the border into Iraq, and we're seeing exactly the same thing, ISIS regrouping. Now, it's true to say there was a huge victory. The caliphate was defeated. It's not what it used to be, but it still is a significant danger. Whit?
All right, Ian Pannell for us in our London bureau. Thank you. Dan?
For more on this, let's bring in our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. She's in Washington, where she's going to be hosting This Week later this morning. Martha, good morning to you. I want to follow up on what Ian and Whit were talking about there, the impact this is likely to have on ISIS. As we know, ISIS formed when the U.S. under President Obama pulled out of Iraq, leaving behind a power vacuum. Now, President Trump has us pulling out of Syria to a large extent. So even though Baghdadi has died, do we still have a sort of terrorist breeding ground there that we need to worry about?
Well, I think that is a real concern because, as you heard, Baghdadi had been in prison in Baghdad, in Iraq, in about 2004, spent 10 months there. I remember looking at those prisons, and they had all of the extremists in one place, the real high-value targets, although he wasn't labeled as such then, but they had them all together. It was a breeding ground for extremists at the time, and that is a real concern now in Syria, especially because we're pulling out most of the troops there. You have seen those massive prisons. You have seen some of those escapes. About 100 escaped, although I know some of them have been recaptured. But that is a concern, especially with U.S. forces moving out. What happens next? I also want to go back to 2011. Osama bin Laden was killed in May of 2011. President Obama pulled out all American forces from Iraq at the end of that year. And, of course, they returned with al-Baghdadi as the leader.
Let's get back to this idea, or say more about this idea of what the U.S. does in this region. You have our current Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, on This Week this morning. What do you think this raid against Baghdadi says about our current commitment to Syria and the fight against ISIS at a time when the president has publicly portrayed this as a fight over, as he calls it, sand 7,000 miles away?
Well, I think several special operations forces are going to be concerned because I believe they will think that right now President Trump is probably saying, we're done. We've got al-Baghdadi. We can get out of there very quickly, even though they are leaving a residual force, a small residual force in Syria. And I think that is the concern, because this is not over. This is a very big deal that they got Baghdadi, but that does not end this. It is an ideological movement, as we know. It all over social media. This is how it began. This is how they used the internet to get more recruits. They still try to do that. So that will continue, and he will be seen as a martyr.
As Martha just said, this is not over. Martha Raddatz, really appreciate your analysis on this big morning. And I want to remind you, Martha has a big show this morning, as discussed. She's going to go one-on-one with Defense Secretary Mark Esper on the latest developments from Syria. Plus, she'll speak exclusively with the head of the impeachment inquiry. That's Congressman Adam Schiff, the Democrat. It's all coming up on This Week later this morning, right here on ABC. Martha, thank you again.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.